Lord Borwick.
My Lords, declaring my interest in the Register as a manufacturer, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name in the order paper.
My Lords, the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index stands at 55.1 and has been above 50, indicating an expansioning activity for 32 consecutive months, supported recently in part by strength in inventory accumulation. Meanwhile, the comparable reading for Germany has fallen into contractionary territory in 2019 at 44.1.
I thank my noble friend for his answer and agree that many small companies are doing very well indeed, and the PMI index, which is a forward-looking index, backs up the excellent GDP figures and the Treasury figures to suggest that the UK economy is thriving. There are always economists who practice the dismal science and who will predict doom and search for a dark cloud wherever they find a silver lining. Would my noble friend have any other ideas to cheer them up?
Well, I'm sure there's those people who forecast 0 for the GDP in February and actually found it was 0.2 might be a little bit cheered up this morning. But I think that the other reasons why we could be cheerful, thinking of ideas for that, well, what about the fact that your unemployment, debt and taxes are all falling and exports, growth, GDP and real wages are all rising?
Yeah. My Lords, doesn't the confidence manifested in the PMI index, as he said, continuously over the last 32 months, pretty much the whole period since the referendum, despite the iterations of Project Fear and the lucubrations of the Remain establishment, show that the majority of UK manufacturers are undismayed by a post-Brexit future. But if their confidence is to be sustained, new investment unleashed, isn't it vital that indecisions and uncertainties about Brexit are swiftly brought to an end by our actually leaving the EU and are not allowed to persist for up to another 6 months or possibly even longer?
I absolutely agree with the first part of the noble Lord's question. I'm sure it's noted on the front bench, his front bench, about that. But in terms of the way forward, we've been very clear that we believe that the best way forward for manufacturing, in fact for the whole economy, is to leave the European Union with a deal. And that's what the Prime Minister is working towards.
My Lords, I just fear that some of their lordships and perhaps the Minister must have missed out some parts of the sentences in the market's report on the PMI, because as companies, it says, this increased as companies stepped up production to build up inventories of both purchases and finished products in advance of Brexit, in other words, stockpiling, and later says, looking ahead, business sentiment remains subdued amid persistent Brexit concerns. The CBI this morning confirmed its view that the economy is down between 1 to 2% below where it would have been without Brexit. Does the government believe that underestimating the issues that industry is facing in any way helps industry handle this Brexit crisis?
I don't dispute that there are headwinds there and uncertainty is bad for business, which is the reason why we want to resolve matters and move forward. But on the point about the Purchasing Managers Index, of course, one of the points about it is it asks people what their future intention is going forward. So that wouldn't explain if people had been in quote-unquote stockpiling from the beginning of the year. It wouldn't explain why now they're actually saying this month they believe that they're actually going to buy more goods and be more positive in the outlook going forward. So I think that is not necessarily the right way to read the numbers.
My Lords, given the performance of the German economy, the French economy and the Italian economy, who are all doing considerably worse than our economy, what explanation does the Treasury have for this?
Well, rather than, given that it's difficult enough to answer for the UK government in your Lordship's house, I won't attempt to answer for other governments. But I can say that I do believe that the resilience that we're seeing in the British economy is tribute to a number of factors. The fact that the UK remains a prime location for foreign direct investment. We have the largest stock in Europe, third largest in the world. Forbes recently identified the UK as the #1 location to invest and set up a business in 2018 and in 2019. And I think all of those factors, low taxation, competitive economy, great skills, are the reasons why people are backing Britain.
My Lords, this question started on the question of manufacturing industry and the mention of the motor car, of course, as far as Germany is concerned. Is it surprising that Germany is having some problems with its exports? One, in relationship to Brexit, but secondly, to standards in the industry, which, of course, have caught the Germans out rather badly in recent years. But, my Lords, 4/5 of the British economy are services. So what's all this jubilation, false jubilation, about manufacturing, when in fact our service industries are showing the real pressure at the present time, and they're not in a position to stockpile in quite the way that manufacturing is?
Well, there are challenges in the services sector. That is absolutely true, and it's crucially important to us. And that's the reason why I think a lot of the uncertainty, which I was referring to earlier in the answer to Baroness Kramer, needs to be resolved. And I think we believe that there is sufficient capacity and demand within the economy to build that up. We know that people are sitting on a lot of cash at the moment. We know that there are a lot of vacancies out there, 850,000 vacancies, showing that there is a lot of demand waiting to go once we get this matter resolved.
Would my noble friend agree that there is nothing more debilitating and corroding than uncertainty? And would he agree with me that a deal needs to be reached, but both Houses of Parliament have a deal before them, a deal which is being resisted by the extremes who, in their desire for a Brexit that would ignore the 48%, may lose Brexit altogether?
Yeah. Well, I agree that the uncertainty needs to end, but I think also the message of the numbers, which my Lord Borwick began by citing and mentioning, is this, that whatever the difficulties that we have as politicians in resolving the matters actually before us, out there are men and women setting up businesses, running businesses, workers in those businesses who are doing an incredible job, building exports to almost record levels, and we have a great deal of confidence in them to continue what they're doing. We must do what we should do.
Lords, the Minister has talked about the resilience of the British economy, but would he accept that is because we are inside the European Union, its single market and its customs union?
Well, but I mean, people have known that the people have voted in 2016 to leave, and since that time we've actually seen almost 1 million jobs added to the economy. We saw 48 billion of foreign direct investment just last year come into the UK, with them knowing of our intention to leave. And I think that we have a globally competitive economy, and that is something which will continue into the future.
Baroness Bloomfield of Hinton, Waldrist.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, the Government recognises the importance of public lavatories as valuable community amenities. At Budget 2018, the Chancellor announced 100% business rates relief for public lavatories in England. This will cut the cost of running these important facilities and help to keep them open.
I thank my noble friend, the Minister, for that response on what is really an important question, because London's provision of public loos is lamentable, both in terms of availability and cleanliness. And this impacts on our tourists, the young, the elderly, the disabled, but also on London cabbies, a disproportionate number of whom suffer from kidney problems and UTIs. Many London hotels have now stopped allowing taxi drivers to use their facilities, although I do commend Pret-a-Manger for their policy of allowing cabbies to access theirs. Can my noble friend the Minister say what further measures the Government can take to encourage councils and perhaps also businesses to restore and maintain decent public loos?
My Lords, I thank my noble friend for what is a genuinely important question. If I could just pick up 2 points in relation to points that she's raised. First of all, changing places, which helps with the provision of disabled lavatory facilities, very important nationwide, and we've got about 1,100. That's important. She also mentioned Pret-a-Manger, and if I too could give a shout-out for them, they are helping in making their lavatories available, and they're part of community schemes which we're certainly promoting up and down the country. First started in Richmond upon Thames in 2004, when in addition to public lavatories, local businesses make their lavatories available, and that's advertised locally and also on apps that exist in this area.
My Lords.
I come from a family of London cab drivers, and and I welcome this question very, very much. Does the Noble Lord join with me, the Noble Lord, in welcoming the British Toilet Association's Use Our Lose campaign, where pubs, cafes and other places allow people to use their toilets and not restrict them to just customers, let people come off to use their conveniences? And as we also welcome the trend in some of our mainline stations, I've noticed that in London Bridge, Charing Cross and St Pancras, they're now free, the toilets are. I'm waiting for Euston and Waterloo to join suit as well.
My Lords, first of all, on the cabbies business, I know that the Noble Lord was telling me how his brother drove past him in his cab the other day. I could well understand his point of view, my Lords. But in relation to the Use Our Lose campaign, which the Noble Lord mentioned, the British Toilet Association being supportive of, I think it's a very important campaign. Unfortunately, it's advertised on their website as an open doors campaign, but they have got the open doors does appear in inverted commas, so I think that's useful. But quite seriously, it is a very worthwhile campaign. If I could also say to the Noble Lord, good news on Waterloo, I think he mentioned, all of the mainline stations in London now have free entrance, which is a good thing, and the Department of Transport, I understand, is encouraging other train operators to do similarly.
My Lords, the Minister has mentioned changing places a couple of times already this morning, and I think that the disabled community, disabled taxi drivers as well, are very grateful for the £2 million that the Department of Transport was given for changing places at service stations. But it's still woeful. 18 out of 100 service stations have changing places facilities. Will the government provide specific grants to local authorities for changing places toilets? Because with public conveniences being closed down everywhere, particularly disabled children, need proper changing places to be changed in, and there is a woeful lack of them in town centres.
My Lords, the Noble Lady, who I know campaigns vigorously and correctly on these issues, is absolutely right about the importance of this. She was pleased to know that the NHS has also been the recipient of £2 million to spend on changing places. But she's right, more needs to be done, and we are looking at how we can progress that, my Lords.
One of my sons has Crohn's, a condition which, as many here will know, all too often results in sufferers being caught drastically short in public. And there's a particular charity which issues them with a card. It's called the Can't Wait card, and it explains in simple terms why the holder has this urgent need for a toilet, and which generally gains them speedy access to WCs in stores, restaurants and so forth. Such is the kindness of strangers. And I just suggest the Minister, is there not perhaps room for a broadly similar scheme to be devised for taxi drivers by their association, at least in the medium and short term, to meet the ever-increasing want of public conveniences?
My Lords, I thank the Noble Lord for that very personalised example of the challenges that we do face, and I'm very interested to hear about the Can't Wait card, which I hadn't heard about previously. He's right that one of the big issues is not actually the availability of public lavatories. They have declined, it's quite true, but often the inability to park nearby because of yellow and double yellow lines, and it's a particular concern for taxi drivers. So if I may, I'd take that back to have a look at, to see if there's any way we can use that Can't Wait card in relation to waiting by a public lavatories, my Lords.
My Lords.
Tourists worldwide judge places by the toilet facilities. We have vast tourist numbers coming to this country. I've just come back from Australia, and I've been all around Europe in the last few weeks, and the quality of those toilet facilities in those cities are vastly higher than ours. So if you take account of nearly 50 tours going through where people will need to go to a toilet with children, this seems to be of extreme importance. Is it something the the Minister could consider, that we actually have to build more toilets and they must be impeccably clean, which the others are?
My Lords, my noble friend raises very interesting points. I think the quality overseas is variable, to be honest, but certainly there are some very good examples of the provision of public lavatories overseas. I've been looking at this in the sort of 72 hours that I've inherited this question to see what is happening, to see what is happening elsewhere. It's a very interesting area, but I will take away. And it's a very important area, quite genuinely. And I sense the House on the last day of term is getting a little bit frivolous, but it is an important area. And I will take back the points that the noble lord has made about the provision of adequate number of facilities. It's an issue that locally does concern people, along with car parking charges. We all know local government, the things that do exercise people are very often car parking charges and public lavatories, and they are important, my lords.
Lord Robathan.
To ask the question, signing my name on the order paper.
My Lords, we support the Great British Spring Clean and are delighted that this year over 500,000 people have already registered to take part. As part of last year's campaign, almost 127,000 schoolchildren participated in the Great Big School Clean, and hopefully this year that number will rise further. The national curriculum is not intended to represent everything that schools should teach. Schools can choose to teach pupils about the impact of litter, and many already help their pupils undertake volunteering, including litter picking.
My Lords, I assure the whole House would congratulate the promoters and the organisers of the Great British Spring Clean, enthusiastically supported, as my noble friend said, by thousands of school children. When I raised this issue about a year ago, the noble Lord Watson of Invergowrie, who I fear is not in his place, from the opposition front bench, suggested this was akin to sending children up chimneys. Now, I didn't have his personal knowledge of the consequences of combustion, but this is about education, not about child labour. If we got all 10 and 11-year-olds in this country to spend one afternoon, just one afternoon in their lives, clearing litter from our towns and our rural lanes, that would lead to them being educated, their families being educated, and in the long term, it might lead to a better attitude in society towards litter. So would my noble friend please press Her Majesty's Government to encourage all schools, either by compulsion or voluntarily, to join this initiative?
Well, my noble friend is right. It is about education, and his aim is laudable, but the government has given a pledge that we will not change the national curriculum for the duration of this Parliament in order to provide stability and consistency for the school programme and indeed for the teaching profession. However, as he will know, as part of the science curriculum, children are taught about scientific concepts that relate to the environment, and this can include teaching about the negative effects of population and development, litter or deforestation.
My Lords, this question relates directly to Year 6 pupils, and would the noble Viscount agree that it would be a very good idea once they've completed the tests in May to encourage them to continue picking litter, but to distinguish those aspects which can be recycled for the use of schools in providing some relief from the enormous budget cuts that they're experiencing, so that the paper can be recycled during the following year?
Well, yes, and I'm certain that head teachers are thinking very carefully about how to put the environment into PSHE and education in schools. And in 2017, the Litter Strategy for England sets out a commitment to facilitate strong, consistent anti-litter education, including reviewing existing teaching resources and making sure that they meet teachers' needs.
My Lords, when we have a question that asks whether we should take out a certain year to do a certain function, has the noble Lord given any thought to how we might expand this? And what might be the good cause we take some time out of the curriculum on in years 7 or 8, or possibly start in 5? Because we have a very crowded curriculum where people are usually fighting to get stuff in. Is this not a ridiculous idea?
Well, I think that teaching about the environment should be spread throughout a pupil's education. And given that this question is about Year 6, I think it's important, actually, that a start is made in the early years. And I'm reminded, as this House will be, of the Mr. Men books. And it might be appropriate to start off with not just Mr. Men or Mr. Recycling or Mr. Litter. So it's a whole process throughout the education of the child through into secondary school.
My Lords, what can be done to stop people spreading litter in the first place?
Well, there are a number of initiatives around, and in fact, as part of our litter strategy, we launched a new campaign called Keep It, Bin It, in partnership with Keep Britain Tidy. And this is the first government-backed national anti-litter campaign in generation. So it's not just focused on school children, it's focused on adults too, who need to take responsibility.
My Lords, I think we'd all from this side support a spring clean-out of some sort. Last month, thousands of people, including primary school children, as well as teenagers and university students, walked out of their lessons as part of a climate change protest. The government say they want young people to be engaged with the issues affecting them, but young people feel that our generation pay no regard to their views. So will the noble Lord the Minister commit to improving their engagement with young people and championing the issues that affect their generation?
Well, the noble Lord is right, and we are looking to commit. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier, schools play a major part in this. And in terms of his point about the strikes, I have to say that it's great to see young people like Greta Thunberg, the young Swedish campaigner, who is so engaged and passionate about climate change, and my Lords were all behind her. However, the department does not condone pupils missing out on education, and I can't think why they couldn't have undertake their protest at weekends and Saturdays and Sundays.
Overnight, we seem to have postponed spring from the 29th of March to the 31st of October. I wonder whether, if there is 2 hours to spare in the national curriculum, maybe we couldn't ask Year 6 children to try and resolve Brexit, because they might do a better job than the current government.
Well, I applaud the ingenuity of the noble Baroness for bringing this particular question around to Brexit. And no, this question is about the environment, and I'm sure that the Liberal Democrats will be behind me in putting that at the forefront as they normally do.
I don't know whether my noble friend Lord Robathan is involved in the Lord Speaker's outreach programme to schools, but if not, he would clearly be a great asset to it, because after explaining to students the work of the House of Lords, he could then lead them out onto the litter trail, showing all the enthusiasm and ebullience which he demonstrates in this House.
Well, I have taken part in that particular outreach programme myself, and I have to say, I'm not sure we could perhaps stretch to that. I think we should focus on explaining the role of the House of Lords.
Does not the Lord the Minister not agree with me that the pressures on primary schools and their teachers are immense, and that actually far better would be to make this kind of education possible within the classroom, which would take up much less time, be far less dangerous, and not expose the children to other risks such as infection?
Well, the noble Lord makes a good point. I mean, I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of teaching on the environment in the classroom, but it is very much up to school heads to decide whether, in fact, they want to take the children outside the classroom. And, for example, let's start by leading by example and clearing up the school grounds. But I think the noble Lord makes a very good point that safety has to come first.
My Lord Lexden.
I beg leave to ask the question, standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, this government is appalled by the introduction of the Sharia penal code in Brunei, allowing hudud punishments. We believe corporal and capital punishment to be against international human rights laws. The Foreign Secretary and the Minister for Asia and the Pacific have personally raised with Brunei our concerns about discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation, and no one should face persecution and discrimination because of who they are and whom they love.
Is it not right that this House should express its utter abhorrence at the Brunei government's barbaric action? Is it not right, too, that we should remind ourselves of the frequent calls made across this House, led by our Lord Speaker when he was on these Conservative benches, that the 50-odd Commonwealth countries that treat homosexuals as criminals should revise their laws and respect human rights as the Commonwealth Charter itself demands? The Brunei government has now defied this Commonwealth Charter in the most flagrant manner. Can it be right that a country where people can be stoned to death because of their sexuality should remain part of today's modern, progressive Commonwealth, committed as it is to human rights?
Well, may I say to my noble friend that we encourage all Commonwealth partners to protect and promote the values in the Commonwealth Charter, very important values, and that includes opposition to all forms of the discrimination. I would say to my noble friend that the Foreign Secretary spoke to Brunei's Foreign Minister, Mr Erdogan, on 4th April to express his concerns, and he will also meet, indeed at this moment may actually be meeting, both Mr Erdogan and the Bruneian Finance and Economic Minister, Mr Amin Lu, where there will be a blunt and, I think, very frank presentation of the UK government's view on this.
My Lords, Sultan of Brunei has had honours and titles bestowed on him by this country, including the Most Honourable Order of Bath, the Most Distinguished Order of St Michael and St George, an honorary commission in the RAF as an Air Chief Marshal, and an honorary Admiral of the Royal Navy. If he continues with such abhorrent human rights abuses, will the government strip him of these honours and titles?
Yeah. Well, such matters, as the Noble Lord raises, do tend to be for the independent body to consider. There are standards that are expected as to whether action is taken against particular individuals is not a matter for the government.
Lords, I join with and I say this advisedly, my noble friend Lord Lexden in his comments on this very important issue. Will the Minister therefore point out to Brunei that there will be economic consequences when countries fail to adhere to universal human rights principles? Furthermore, will the government support the Secretary-General of the Commonwealth when she expressed her concerns that the actions of Brunei, which interestingly also affect women and people who commit adultery, that these actions are not in principle with the declaration of the Commonwealth and Commonwealth principles?
Well, I can say to the Noble Lord that my noble friend, the Minister for the Commonwealth, Lord Ahmad of Wimbledon, spoke to the Secretary-General of the Commonwealth last Thursday, and the Secretary-General is already in contact with the Government of Brunei and is working through bilateral and Commonwealth channels.
My Lords, will my noble friend listen very carefully to what the Noble Lord Lord Cashman and the Noble Lord Lexden have said? As most Islamic scholars now, of course, recognise that the Sultan and Brunei are on the wrong track in their interpretation of the Sharia, would she, as we are chair in office of the Commonwealth, would she very strongly support the current efforts of the Commonwealth, which I don't think have been fully publicised, to bring to the attention of Brunei that they are on the wrong track and achieve some really radical change and a better understanding before the horrors of this are really worked out?
Well, I thank my noble friend for, I think, a very pertinent observation, particularly the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group, which is currently chaired by Kenya, and the UK is a member by virtue of being chair in office, and that Ministerial Action Group provides a space for sensitive discussions. Now, by convention, I'm not at liberty to confirm which specific issue we'll raise in that forum, but I don't think a crystal ball is required to predict that this issue may be of interest.
My Lords, the Minister mentioned that international law prohibits the intentionally inflicted pain as a form of... My Lords, Article 1 of the UN Convention Against Torture prohibits the use of intentionally inflicted pain as a form of punishment by a state actor. We are a signatory to that convention, and that means Article 3 says we should not send anybody back to a country where they could be subject to this kind of treatment. So, my Lords, I commend the Noble Lord Lexden having raised this. But could the government tell us what are we going to do as our country? What guidance has been given to asylum decision-makers here and to our High Commission in Brunei to give protection to anyone facing these awful punishments?
Yeah, good question.
Well, let me reassure the noble lady that advice has been given to British citizens. That advice is available from the FCO. We're not advising against travel to Brunei. Advice will be given so that people can travel there and be safe. Perhaps very particularly within Brunei, we should consider the position perhaps of British forces in the garrison, and we have the necessary protections in place with the government of Brunei to mitigate against any issues that might arise from the introduction of these new laws. But in general, in relation to the United Nations, the United Kingdom's position is very clear, and she is correct, that We wish Brunei to expedite its ratification of UNCAT. We think that's very important. That's a welcome move. But we actually want to see Brunei go further to safeguard against the use of inhumane punishments and to protect all individuals from discrimination on any grounds.
My Lords, just to be clear, will my noble friend tell the House whether or not our advice to people visiting Brunei has changed in the last few weeks?
I think the question which I heard was about travel. I said in response to an earlier question, we are not advising against travel to Brunei, but as for all foreign travel, we would encourage British nationals to read our travel advice alongside other resources available to them to help them make an informed decision and plan for a safe trip.